After 30 years of waiting, we finally have Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon 2. I've recently rented Zelda the Wand of Gamelon 2, also known as The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and I've really been enjoying my time playing. After the long wait for Tears of the Kingdom, as well as the Link's Awakening HD remake before that, it's really nice to have a very fresh take on the Zelda formula, and that's what this is, very, very fresh. It's an interesting mixture of 2D Zelda games and 3D Zelda games, but put it together in some modern conglomeration that is honestly very appreciable. And there's a lot of things to appreciate about this game, but all while I've been appreciating, there's been this lingering feeling in the back of my mind, which is just confliction. I want to make this very clear. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is not a bad game. In fact, it's a pretty dang good one. But it's definitely got some hindrances that's been affecting my time playing so far. I've only rented the game and I haven't played all the way through, but after playing, I was just like, there's stuff I gotta say. I can't keep it all bottled up in here. I gotta do what everyone else does. I gotta set up my microphone, turn on the lights, put on my perfume. You can't smell it, so I'll never tell. The first thing I want to talk about is the summoning, because it's the biggest part of the game and it's something that I've just had a lot of thoughts about in general. And if we're talking about generals here, I generally really like the summoning mechanics. It's a great approach at bringing creativity into every step of the game. We're not talking just puzzle solving or monster fighting. Even maneuvering around the world requires a level of creative solving. And whatever solution you come up with is usually just one solution of many that would get you to where you need to be. Kind of a side note, but I'm also a game master for Dungeons & Dragons, and one of my favorite kinds of puzzles to throw at players is the ones that block maneuverability with no set objective in mind. For an example, the giant ravine or a tall wall that the players have to somehow get over. I have no idea how they're going to do it, but I know you throw the group of people together who are creative thinkers, they're going to figure something out. I think it's pretty bold to bring creativity to disrupt the formula that they already know works pretty dang well for Zelda games. There was a touch of this in Tears of the Kingdom with the different contraptions that you could make, but it was a little bit different there. In Tears of the Kingdom, you could spend a long time coming up with a contraption to do whether big or small tasks, but it was not often required. A lot of times it was pretty optional, in fact. You would actually save a lot of time in Tears of the Kingdom if you played uncreatively and just did the obvious solution at every step of the way. For my playthrough, that resulted in me just doing some creative things here, and then other times when I wasn't feeling it, just did like the easy way out. Sometimes I would get fancy with it, but you always had the choice. Echoes of Wisdom is a little bit different in this front. You are required to be creative at pretty much every challenge and obstacle that you face. You encounter a lot of walls that are 3 or 4 blocks tall, and every time you do, you need some kind of creative combination of what objects to place down and when you place them in order to progress. Okay, put down half slab. Let's try the bed ladder to go up. Where does the double tree go? Oh no, the other thing despawned when I summon the double tree. It gets a little bit tricky, and it's not a bad thing. It is fun and it is creative. I'm a creative guy, but it simply increased the exhaustion level faster than other games. I found myself putting down Echoes of the Wisdom far more than I was putting down Tears of the Kingdom, and it wasn't necessarily because it wasn't fun. It was just, oh my gosh, my head needs a break. It's also prone to getting stuck on things that you wouldn't normally get stuck on because you know the solution's there. You just can't quite get the thing to stack on the thing and then stop the wind. So if you go in playing it like a regular Zelda game, you'll notice that the experience is a little bit slower paced, and you'll probably find yourself putting the game down more frequently. But all of this isn't inherently a bad choice for a game. I mean, intense puzzle games do exist out there. It's just that for my preference, these points of exhaustion really add up, which gives me a general exhausted approach when playing the game. But honestly, I could get by all of that. That's not a huge issue. There's something else that's a much bigger issue though. In Echoes of Wisdom, you are constantly collecting more echoes, which is more tools to your tool belt, which sounds great because you have unlimited options for all of these amazing creative challenges. However, this game somehow made the inventory system worse than Tears of the Kingdom. And it's not to say that Tears of the Kingdom's inventory system is abysmal. I just kind of thought that we'd be going upwards, not down. The quickest way to choose which summon you need to do, which mind you, you need to choose your summon at pretty much every step of the game, but the quickest way to do that is to hold right on the D-pad and show the slider. Then you got to move over to the right stick because you can't use the left stick because your left thumb, ooh, it's busy. So you switch on the right stick until you find the summon that you're looking for. Now, as for why a whole grid doesn't show up, I'm not sure. I guess that's just too complicated for who they think is playing the game. None of this is an issue at the start when you only have 4 or 5 echoes, but as you start getting more, you start to realize, oh boy, this list is getting big. You have some helpful sorting options like sort by most used. I find myself using that one the most, but even that is kind kind of annoying because anytime I get a new summon and then I get a new summon after it and then a new summon after it, and I'm like, oh, I still need to go back and find that darn elephant statue. It's tough. It's tough to find, and especially doing it fast. There are a lot of monsters in this game to fight, and every time you have to cycle to find which echo you want to summon to fight off the monsters, and that ends up adding up to a large percentage of your playtime. And I would know because I searched through my footage. A lot of that footage is just sliders. For this video, it is tough to get enough footage that isn't just me in sliders. It's kind of crazy. And while we're talking about summoning monsters, they all have different number of triangles, which depicts how much you can actually summon at a time. So to make full use of your triangles, it's usually in your best interest to summon multiple kinds of echoes, but it gets really annoying when you summon a 3-star, then you go over to 1-star, but then your 3-star dies, so you have to cycle back to your 3-star, and then, oh, it moved because I'm sorting by most used, now it got bumped up on the list, it's higher in the hierarchy, I don't even know where to find it. I think what boggles my mind about this is that other Zelda games have done a really good job with not complicating the player with their items. In the past, it was just kind of a staple to allow you to put items onto your hotbar. You could have boomerang on Y, hookshot on X, bow on Z, or whatever else. I understand that's a little bit more difficult to incorporate in games like Breath of the Wild that uses so many button inputs, but Echoes of the Wisdom doesn't have that many inputs. I don't know how they have this many buttons on a controller and decide to not allow you to hotkey to any of them. You use the half stool a lot, at least I do. I also use the bed a lot. It'd be really nice to have a button that was permanently for summoning a bed that I could choose. And if I'm in an intense boss fight where I know I need other items, I can just easily assign them to those different things. How in the world is that not an option? I just don't understand. But let's play devil's advocate and say that maybe adding echoes to specific keybinds is just too complicated for this otherwise simple game. It's not a very simple game though. I don't imagine many babies will be able to figure out half of the puzzles in here, but hey, that's okay. Let's play devil's advocate and say that. I think a really easy fix that would go a long way, it wouldn't completely fix the problem, but it'd go a long way, is to just separate the placeable objects from the monsters. Have those be 2 separate buttons. Most of the time you're summoning them for different reasons anyway. You're not doing much object placing with enemy placing, just have it be separated so we can easily see, oh, here's at least where all the monsters are. Not only is it a small and easy thing to do, but they did that in previous Zelda games. Both in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they separated certain items from the left D-pad and the right D-pad and the up D-pad. You know, you had shields, you had bows, you had weapons. Again, I'm not saying those games' inventory systems are perfect. Many people have commented on how they're not, but to put everything on one slider, that's just steps backwards. I really don't want the whole video to be on this point, but it's the most baffling point to me because it affects every moment of this game. You are always summoning things. So summoning as a concept and even execution, I like for the most part. I think it's really fun to be able to collect different monsters. It feels like Pokemon. Very rarely am I annoyed about where things are being placed or having trouble placing things on top of other things. I find that most of the mechanics themselves actually work pretty dang well. It's simply navigating for the items that becomes an issue, especially when you actually enjoy collecting the echoes, which I do. It's pretty fun to just build up your collection, and summoning monsters to build an army is just fun. Like, that is a fun part of the game. I've hammered this nail enough. Let's move on to my next point. The Zelda Formula, something we've touched on, but let's actually talk about it. As we all know, the art style and feel of this game is very similar to Link's Awakening HD, which is honestly a Zelda game that I really didn't get that much into. In fact, I kind of burnt out pretty quickly beyond a Let's Play series I did. But it's not because of the art style was great, it's because it was a almost shot-for-shot remake of the original game, which honestly had some bizarre game design choices. Even just finding out what to do can be tricky in Link's Awakening HD. The fetch quest that goes on through the entire game is pretty annoying. In general, the puzzles don't stand out to me nearly as much as they do in other Zelda games, and the dungeons feel a little bit all over the place in terms of difficulty and consistency. So it kind of just felt like I was playing a retro game that looked nice, which isn't really enough for me. However, Zelda Echoes of the Wisdom is a fresh, new, modern experience. The mere fact that Zelda can just jump over tiles now is just... Who knew that's really what a 2D game needed, was just easier jumping? That changes a lot. It's also an open world kind of 2D game. And I don't mean that in you could do anything in any order, although there's a lot of stuff you can do in any order. But in terms of navigating the world, you can go pretty much anywhere you want at any time. And even just physical restrictions, you can creatively get your way over them. You can create enough blocks to stack yourself up high, find different areas to use the trampoline, yada, 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 you're set. And that goes back to the mix of 3D and 2D 2D Zelda that we were talking about earlier. Something that I loved about Breath of the Wild when it first came out is the fact that you could climb over things. Not only does the world have all these tall structures and natural elements, but they don't fully obstruct your movement. You're able to get over them. It just depends on your determination at your given skill level. And it's just great. I think that's something that should stick with 2D Zelda games moving forward. This game also introduces a lot of side-scrolling sections that honestly are great. Like, the side-scrolling feels like a very natural part of the game. It doesn't feel like you're playing a separate game. You're just Zelda in a side-scrolling environment and summoning echoes inside the side-scrolling environment. It works perfectly. As someone who recently played Zelda The Four Swords Adventures for my latest video, I can confidently say that the side-scrolling portions of Echoes of Wisdom are far better here than they were over there. Something that's hard to talk about because it's almost expected at this point, but the music is incredible, and I'd like to think it's actually a step above, but maybe it's just because I'm used to Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild's more light approach to having a score in the background. But hearing this modern take on old Zelda music as well as the new remixes they've done has honestly been a wonderful experience, and I just enjoyed listening to the game quite a bit. And if we want to get a little nerdy here, let me just put on my graphic designer glasses. The UI in this game is great. It uses the modern, more accessible types of fonts and backgrounds, but it has its own stylistic feel to it that I think both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom was lacking a little bit. In fact, I think a lot of modern Nintendo games have actually kind of been lacking in the stylistic UI area. Obviously, text probably should be more clear than it used to be, and accessibility is very important, but I think there's definitely some ways that Nintendo can up their game in terms of UI in the modern day. And Echoes of Wisdom did just that. It upped the game. EA. It upped the game. A small thing I wanted to mention is that they actually brought back stamps. Some of you may not know this, but those were originally introduced in the Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks for the Nintendo DS, but to be honest, they kind of suck in Echoes of Wisdom. There's a lot more of them to collect, but the stamps themselves aren't even remotely interested. They're just some random dude doing a pose, and then what you quickly realize is, oh, they're all duplicates of each other. What's the point of getting different stamps if they're duplicates? I don't understand. At least in Spirit Tracks, the stamps had this cool little artistic style that made nods to the area that you found it in. I have no idea what this guy here has to do with this location. Like, what's the correlation there? I think the last topic I want to cover in this video is just Zelda herself, because she is a girl this time, and that's a fun bit, but I'm going to drop it here because it's going to get really complicated really quickly if I don't. The protagonist curse of Link having a lack of character has carried on to this game and now been delivered over to Zelda, which is a little bit of a shame. I understand the approach of having a protagonist with no character so that we can put our own character inside of them, and that's pretty much what we've been doing with Link for all of his games. But I think it kind of sucks that we've been seeing actual well-developed characters of Zelda throughout the years, and then to just take all of that away and put her into a nameless body is just kind of like, okay, well then what's the point of even playing as Zelda? And I think that's the bulk of it, right? Like, why are we Zelda? If we were playing as Link, then would the game change at all? Not really. I think what makes me a little sad is that not only has Zelda had a lot of characters in the past, but she's had different characters. We could have gone with pretty much any approach of a Zelda character that we've seen previously. Something people always talk about Skyward Sword is how Zelda is portrayed in that game, as she's a lot more caring and warm with Link and a little bit more naive and young and lively. While you take a look at Twilight Princess, you have Zelda who is just very responsible. She feels the weight of the kingdom on her shoulders. She feels like she has to make sacrifices for certain things. And then you have Tetra, who is literally a pirate. Like, she's doing bad things. She's tying people up and stealing bombs from them, which is just pretty wild to say out loud. There's just a lot of interesting takes on the Zelda character, and it's weird to me that they decided to take no take. They took no take, Jerry. If we remove everything about Zelda from the character and don't put anything back, then what's the point of even playing as Zelda? Like, we're playing Girl Link. That's really what this is. It's just a big missed opportunity, especially after people's reaction to the original Tears of the Kingdom trailer where people were like, wait, are we going to get to play Zelda this time? But characters aside, there is kind of an interesting gameplay reason for why you're playing as Zelda, and that, of course, is the Link abilities. And I think it's an interesting way to incorporate old Zelda play with this other creative, slow-paced approach. But to be honest, I don't really know how I feel about the way they implemented that. Like, I actually don't know, so I'm just gonna say some thoughts and see where I land. On the one hand, I don't really mind not having the traditional sword and shield and bow for everyday tasks. I think it is fun to use only echoes in order to progress. But there are times, and this kind of goes back to the exhaustion level, but there are times when I encounter a group of monsters, and the last thing I want to do is just summon a bunch of echoes to fight them. A lot of times I end up just skipping them. While if I had my sword, I actually would love to engage and kill them all before progressing. I know what you're thinking, Pat. You could just transform into Link and then fight those mobs at the at an individual time. And you're right, except you only get the charge for your sword at very specific areas where the rift is pulling apart, and there's a lot of fighting outside of the rift pulling apart. So I always have this like try to be optimized view of like, hey, let's not use that sword unless we have to, because we got to save that charge for any moment, as if I'm playing like Elden Ring or something, you know, where you got difficult boss fights. I could honestly use the sword more often than I do, but I still feel that. There's also kind of a flopsidedness with the creativity of attacking without a sword, especially when it comes to, let's say, dungeons and boss fights, times where you want the gratification of completing a challenge without using Link's form. And that can be annoying when you encounter a boss fight that pretty much requires Link's abilities. I remember the boss in the desert dungeon specifically, I was trying really hard to utilize mobs in order to kill this guy, and it was just taking forever. Like, it made no sense to use mobs. Eventually I just switched to my sword, boom, he's dead like instantly. And that's just kind of annoying. You want to take the creative approach sometimes, and then you can't. And then there's some times where you want to do the less creative approach, but then you're worried that you're going to run out of your meter in case you need to use it later. Again, that's probably a non-worry, you know, I'm just crazy. I'm crazy. So all of it kind of makes me 50-50 on how I feel about the Link abilities in general, but check back with me in 2 weeks. Maybe I'll know how I feel about it. Those are all the points I wanted to go over in this video. They're just the stuff that stood out to me the most. I do overall like the approach this game has taken, and I'm glad they're experimenting more with the Zelda formula in general. I just think I would have more fun with the game and generally be less exhausted while playing if they address some of the issues I brought up, and then I'd pretty much be a happy camper. However, if they ever make a Zelda Wand of Gamelon 3 and iron out those kinks, then it just might end up being a perfect Zelda game. If you like hearing me talk about Zelda games, then you could check out my recent video on 2004 games, which includes at least 2 Zelda titles. You can also check out my Patreon or subscribe here and see videos as they come out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one. So long.